Hello everyone, this is FIDE Master Viktor Neustruev. Today we have our next workshop. The topic of the workshop is the immobile pawn as the base of the pawn chain. So we are going to talk about pawn chains, how to play with them, what to undermine, and so on. Let's wait until more participants are going to join. Okay, so today Europeans shifted to the winter time, and that's why some of them may forget about the event, and that's why we may expect fewer participants today. But anyway, we'll see how it goes. Is there anything you want to share with me today? Okay, I want to share a game on Lichess. So Alex, yes, you can send the link to this game in the chat, for example. Why not? Anyway, let's start. So the topic is about today's workshop is devoted to the immobile pawn of the it's devoted to the base of a pawn chain and what happens when this base is immobile. So it's a pawn of a pawn chain which cannot move forward because it's blocked or because it, for example, weakens the position. Well, let's say if they push the pawn to b3, we can say that this is a pawn chain. And the a2 is considered to be the base. But if, let's say, black does this trade on b3, then the b3 pawn will be the base. Well, when you understand how to play with pawn chains, it allows you to create a proper strategy and play for a win. So, for example, if you are a player who plays against a pawn chain, then you should attack the base. Try to destroy it. What else? You can try to blockade it with your pawns and pieces. You can try to undermine it with your pawns, for example. When you have to play with a pawn chain, what you should do? Well, you should make sure that this pawn chain is safe. You don't need to like keep your pieces defending it. So, for example, you should choose such a pawn chain which allows you to keep your base protected, and then each pawn protects the other pawn. So this chain is likely to restrict the enemy piece's movements, and it creates a solid platform for your own. Your pieces can be actively placed because of the pawn chain, even if they are behind this pawn chain. Well, a lot depends on the type of the position, of course. So anyway, this immobile pawn, which is a base of a pawn chain, is very often a strategic anchor, which can define the successful strategy either for you or for your opponent. Let's start with our example. Here, Oh, well, black to move. This is the game that Gary Kasparov played with black pieces against Geta Kamsky. So what should we play? C6 or what? Obviously not. There is a very common move that everyone knows. It's f5. So yes, Gary plays f5. With f5, he wants to attack the pawn on e4. For example, if they play f3, then he wants to push f4 and g4 and so on and attack on the king side, undermining the pawn on f3. Okay, so the game continued with b4. Knight f6, f3, f4, like it is. And what do you think white should do in this position? h4. No, h4 is likely to be a weakness. So h4, for example, knight goes here, and then the queen goes there. So it's even possible to sacrifice the knight on e7. c5. Oh, no. Okay, so white should play c5. Yes, that's right. White should play c5 because this is a pawn chain. They should, at a certain moment, trade on d6 and put more pressure on such a pawn with knight b5 and knight c4. This is exactly what they tried to do, but black managed to support it. So c5 was played. Kasparov ignores it for now and plays this move, knight c4. Taking there weakens the position. So b takes c5. Well, b7 is vulnerable. There is a breakthrough with d6, and there is e5 pawn hanging too. So let me show you this scenario. For example, take. This pawn is a weakness. d6 is coming, and if d6 is coming, it opens the position, and because of that, white black no longer can continue their attack on the king side. That's why, of course, black shouldn't take. Black should only take if they have no better way to save the pawn. In this position, they do have. So they played this move, knight g6. Well, what's your opinion regarding knight b5? Do we still have a chance to support the pawn on d6, or this time we have to take or even sacrifice on d6? What's your opinion? Ah, black should play a6. Interesting. So a6, what they are going to continue with? Maybe knight c3, actually. Yeah, a6 works, good point. I think Garry Kasparov for this position prepared g4. So if, for example, c takes d6, knight takes d6, then what do you think he can play? Well, if this knight takes on d6, then it's a6. If this knight moves, the other knight is hanging. And if they play knight c8, still a takes b5 and the knight is trapped. But what if the b knight takes? What's your opinion? G takes f3? What's the purpose? Bishop takes f3. So g takes f3, yes, such a move should be played, but I think it's too early for such a move at the moment. Isn't there a tactical solution? Okay, Alex suggests g3. Interesting. And then h3 is played. Well, you should be ready to sacrifice the bishop on h3, but right now you're not. Okay, so Oh, sorry, we switched from one game to another one. So here it's actually b5. How does b5 works? Let me show you. Well, first of all, if they take on c8, we take on c4, and the knight on c8 is still trapped. But if they take there, then g3 comes. And after h3, it can be bishop h3. Why so? Because after that, it's a double attack. So here, Kasparov could have an attack. And b5 is required to not let them trade on c8. So that could happen. If f takes g4 first, then it's knight e4 and d6 is protected. So queen c2, for example, knight goes back, c takes, knight takes, and bishop g4, the number of pawns is equal. That's why knight b5 wasn't played by Geta Kamsky. Instead, a4. Oops, a4. What do you think? Now this pawn potentially requires protection. How do we protect such a pawn on d6? Knight e8? Well, knight e8 is a bit passive because we want to use this knight in the attack. Okay, so there is a question, why am I FIDE master? Because currently my rating is under 2300. My rating, my maximal rating was 23 and 5, and this is where I claimed, this is when I claimed a FIDE master title. Then I decreased it a little because of rating deflation in the world, in the chess world. I also saw people with 2100B in international masters. They were granted with such a title, winning a certain competition, for example. Okay, queen e7. Well, queen e7, the queen is already defending d6 from d8, so it's not required. Okay, those of you who play King's Indian, please remember this feature, rook f7 and bishop f8, because the bishop is probably the worst piece in this position, this exact bishop. It's totally blocked with the pawn chain. At least it can do one helpful task, being there, protecting here. And the rook on f7 then goes to g7 and supports the attack. This is exactly what happened in the game. Bishop a3, Geta Kamsky wants to add pressure on d6. So it's in danger. That's why bishop f8. At a certain moment, if we need, knight can go to e8 too, but we would prefer to use this knight into the attack. Okay, so once a chess player gets a FIDE title, it keeps, well, he keeps it forever until sanctions are applied. For example, there was a grandmaster from Latvia who started cheating, and he lost his title because of cheating. So, but just dropping your rating below 24 doesn't mean that you lose a grandmaster title. So once you achieve a title, that's it. You're gonna keep it. Fine. But you shouldn't be thinking about it. You should more think of how to improve the quality of your games rather than achieving titles. So once the quality of your games improves, then you'll see that your rating starts growing, and then you may think, okay, so how much time do I need to devote to chess to get a title? If I see that, for example, every tournament I increase my rating, but let's say 50 or 40 points, and then you should think about titles. For now, it's too early, especially if you don't know how to train. Well, if so, I would kindly recommend you to hire a coach. The coaches are quite experienced chess players and they know how to train. Um, well, you can create a training program for you, either yourself or ask someone. There is actually a product on my website. Let me send you the link. So if you are interested, I recommend this one. Well, you send me your games and I analyze them and tell you what you should be doing during the next 3 months to get better. Fine. So let's continue. Uh, This is where it seems that Geta Kamsky already has to move the king closer to the center to avoid an attack because his activity on the queen side becomes slower. So, but no, he continued with a5. He wanted to keep attacking. Well, I think this is what he wanted originally, to distract this pawn and to take on c6. Rook g7, b5. b6 is coming. So what do you think? Should black continue with g4, or is there anything else that requires us well, is there another move that we should play as a prophylaxis? What do you think? In my opinion, this is exactly what Geta Kamsky wants, b6. He even is completely fine with sacrificing this pawn on c5. He later wins it back. Okay, so there are two ideas. So h5 following with g4 and b6. So, and I think b6 is a proper plan here. Why? Because you can play h5 later. First, it is required to stop b6, because if you do h5, then he does b6. And then what? So a takes b6, then they can take on b6 with a pawn, with the a pawn, for example. And once this happens, they take there. And this is a weakness. Of course, they don't want to blunder here, so that's why they keep the knight there. But once they find how to protect this, maybe with this move, then knight b6 is going to happen. And there is not much you can do to save the pawn on b6. That's why such a move like b6 was required, and this is exactly what Gary played. So c takes d6, c takes d6. Well, maybe he could take there, but it could lead to the same position. So take, and the pawns are still protected. C takes d6, c takes b6, d6, knight a2 was played. Why knight a2? The knight now goes to c6. Logical. The best way to play was actually this, and trying to attack it. After which, I don't think rook b8 should be played in this position, because in fact the b6 pawn is not hanging. No, oh, it is. It is hanging with this move. Oh, so, because if this move, then it's rook a3. Okay, so let's say we continue our attack. Can they capture here? What's your opinion? It seems that black still has chances to succeed with their attack, but how exactly they should play? G takes f3, knight h4. Interesting, but you are not creating a threat and your rook is hanging. Because G takes f3, let's make it on the board. Then knight goes to h4. And what? You're not threatening neither to take on f3 nor to take on g2. So let's go back. Knight h4, yes, knight h4, yes, I agree. So knight e8, then you have knight g2. Well, this king h1. And then this move probably queen takes. There is bishop g4. So they play queen d3, you can take there. The black has a compensation for the exchange. But it's better if you first sacrifice exchange here. Then knight has to take because it's under attack now. And then g3 or knight h4. But g3 looks better. h3, fine, let's take on h3. And then use our queen to attack with queen here. Because king g2 leads to knight h4. Once we take, there is a deadly attack. So let's continue. As for a6, this is what was recommended by Eckhand. C takes, after that we can play a6. Okay, fine. But what did you achieve with a6? You closed the position for white. How do they attack on the king side? On the queen side, sorry. So that's why a6 strategically is a mistake. Fine. Let's continue. Yeah, closing the position on the queen side isn't the white's plan. Instead, they want to keep it open to invade the enemy territory and deflect these pieces from the attack, forcing black to defend the squares of invasion. But knight a2 was played. That was already an accuracy, which allowed Gary to play g4. And this is a threat, so that's why white has to capture there. So knight h4, attacking g2 and attacking g4. Well, what's your opinion? Can white defend the position with h3? Okay, so what can we take? On e4 then? That's a good point. Well, we can take on g4. I think John's suggestions is better. We can play h5 and still continue the attack, because if they take there is knight g2, there is rook g2, there is bishop h3. So, well, I think bishop h3 is probably the best. Maybe knight g2 is okay, doesn't matter. Anyway, yes, I think it's better. That's why they have to play something else. They played rook b3, allowing us to capture on g3. Well, what rook b3 was played for? Well, they wanted to defend the third rank and stop f3. Now, once the f pawn was exchanged, so the black's position contains of many threats. So not only the king is in danger, but this pawn is potentially weak. That's why they played bishop f3, which is a typical maneuver. So they the pawn with the bishop and still maintain a kind of a pawn chain. Yes, the bishop acts like a big pawn, but it also attacks g4, which means that black cannot move their pieces away too early. Well, black wants to attack. What their next move should be? How to bring more resources to the place of action? Who can tell me? Okay, so we have several suggestions here. Queen g5, take on a5, h5. I have a question. Why not knight g4, knight takes g4, and bishop c4, after that queen g5? I don't see where bishop c4, which move? Bishop g4 maybe. Knight e3, knight h2. Well, I don't think knight h2 right now works. Because knight h2, king h2, then what? That's the reason why they played rook here. So let me see. Knight h2, king h2. Then you have to move it. So you have to move it to g2. So bishop takes, queen h4. Rook h3 probably is a bad idea because rook g2. But bishop h3, and this move is you can play with a rook there. Okay. Okay, yeah, with a rook is really risky. So king g1 then. Bishop h3, rook f2. How about rook g3 first? You mean in this position? But they're gonna take it. And then take with the king. So queen here, king g1, rook g3 in this position. Well, they are not going to take it. Or maybe they will. Let me see. Well, maybe they... Yeah, I think they should take. Take, 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 and bishop d6. This is not checkmate because the king escapes. And once they take on e5, it seems that the white's position is winning. There is also queen f3. Rook g3 in this position when the bishop was still blocking. Okay, fine. How does it help? Well, maybe knight d2. Yeah, it does make sense. I see it. So these pieces do not participate. This is the biggest issue. So Gary Kasparov played g takes h5 here. Sorry, he played b takes a5. Why? To let this square for the queen, to allow the queen to go there. The knight is a problem, but the queen potentially may go there, and well, he can also attack the rook, provoke to move it. For example, queen d2, this is exactly what he did. Rook goes to c3, and bishop d7, adding pressure there. He tries to bring more resources to the place of action. Right now, there was no tactical strike, but after a few moves, already there is. What would you play in this position? Black is a pawn up, so that's why maybe even the end game is winning, but can you finish the game in the middle game? Okay, so then suggest to capture on c4 and then continue with knight e3. There is also this, and queen b6. Interesting. With knight f2 as a threat. Maybe rook c2 then? What else? Take knight e3. Okay, attacking g2. Yes, it works. How white should continue here? Maybe just retreat. Then you can take on g2, but it's not mate. Okay, so you're very, very close. The move that Gary played in this position, well, of course, there is always queen g5. This is not what Gary played, but let's study this move first. Queen takes g4, attacking g2, and maybe on the next move you can take it. If you take it with a knight, there will be a pin. That's why let's take it with a queen and pass the game to this endgame with two extra pawns. Black should be winning. So Gary saw that win, but he also saw knight h2. King h2. How this strategy works? Who can tell me? Now what? Okay, knight takes f3, queen h4. Yeah, the problem of knight f3 is that they're gonna take with a rook. And then queen h4 isn't a win. You can, of course, win a piece back with rook c4, but it is better if you take on c4 first. Then we're threatening to take this rook. So, and if they take, which of course they cannot do because it's over, it's checkmate. So they have to make a rook move or support this rook with the other rook. This is exactly what happened in the game. So Gary won another pawn and continues his attack. Knight f3. The rook takes. Still, there is a check. King moves. There is no possibility to block it because of bishop on d7. So that's why king g1. And this is where he took the third pawn. Maybe it was already enough to play this move, threatening here, but rook a4. Rook a4 is fine. Queen f2. Queen h5. I don't know why Geta Kamsky didn't resign here. They played a little more moves. So it's already over 3 extra pawns and attack. And he should, of course, understand that he plays against Garry Kasparov, not just a random person. Um, so Garry Kasparov, of course, knows how to realize the advantage of 3 pawns. So he sacrifices the rook, takes the one on f3, threatens mate, queen d2, queen g4, threatening with f3, knight c3, f3, rook a7. And what was the final move after which Geta Kamsky finally resigned? It's queen h3. Well, queen d4, queen d4 is interesting actually, but the problem, no, I don't think there is a problem. You can take there, right? But queen h3 and then rook g2 is unstoppable. Yeah, this is where Getakamsky resigned. Okay, so let me comment Alex. Alex says that I should add this 3 months program on the Chesslands website. No, I don't think I need to. You can find it on my website. So it's not really required. Well, if you want to enroll into this program, you can do it on my own website, TheChessWorld.com. Yes, and then you choose coaching and then choose this program. So that's why I don't need to put it to Chesslands. Fine. Okay. So Queen H3 and you attack on G2. And you should understand that actually that program doesn't mean that there will be live classes. I'm just telling you which exercises you should do. So based on your games, I see what you need to improve and I explain what you should do step by step every week, what kind of activities. And it's very likely that once doing it properly, you improve your quality of the game very, mm, you improve it a lot. At least people who did follow the training program, they did so. That's why I actually decided to publish such a training program on my website. Fine. So what did happen in this game? Let's make a conclusion. Well, that was a pawn chain. So that was a pawn chain, and black also had a pawn chain. White's idea was to attack on d6 and invade the enemy camp. And what black wanted, they wanted to continue with g4, take on f3, open the file, and attack the king. Because this is how they definitely ruin the pawn chain. Taking with the g pawn almost never works because it exposes the king too much, and black can take advantage of the king's weakness in such a case. So both players were attacking the bases. They first traded on either f3 or d6, and then they were keeping attacking it to play for a win. Black was faster because it was the king side, and if black creates problems to the white king immediately, instead of doing any activity on the queen side, white should immediately focus on their king safety and try to secure the king. So that's why if you do the same thing on the king side, you are very likely to succeed if you play faster than your opponent, if you do your threats faster than your opponent does. So that's why in such positions, black wins more often. Where did white go wrong? Okay, so let me show you. A4 was good. Oops. What else? Let me scroll it. So that was still okay, but bishop a3 maybe was a wrong move. In this position, maybe this should be played first because the bishop moves to a3 and that bishop was out of the place of action for a while. So let's say if they played a5 first, you played this, they played b5, then what? So let's say what did happen in the game? It was g4 if I'm not mistaken. It was b6 actually. This time you play b6. Then what can it be? It can be c6 and then a takes, and then there could be some invasion through the a file. So I think that losing tempo on bishop e3 made the black's attacks faster. White must take early on d6. Well, maybe take, but then what? b5, b6 still. I also think that let's say this position without bishop on a3. So let's make it. Let's do like that. So for example, take, knight a4 looks stronger. There is no bishop hanging, and because of that, this pawn is vulnerable. Is there g4? Yes, there is, but the rook is not on g7. That's why g4 isn't dangerous. So spending just one tempo, which on the first glance added pressure on the weak pawn on d6, was actually a mistake. So I think that made the black's position better. This bishop a3 move, which is logical, but in fact was a tempo loss. Let's continue. Let's take a look at this position. So This is a position with mutual chances. White has space, but the bishop on c6 is better than the bishop on c2. Well, white does b4. They want to get more space on the queen side, create weaknesses, attack them, and such a plan would be really good if there were no queens on the board. But because of the queens, it's likely to fail. Because of what? So here I want you to think about the pawn chains, and as usual, I want you to undermine the base of a pawn chain. It's a pawn chain even if it consists of only two pawns. Okay, so Vivek suggests playing g5. Well, interesting. Don't you think that it weakens the king? King escapes and then g5. Yes, I think it's better. But if you play king f7, I think they're gonna play queen h5. Okay, let me see what John suggests. G5, right. Right away. This is what the computer always tells me. Well, in this position, I don't think g5 should be played, but queen h4 first. Yeah, queen h4 first, actually. Well, g5 exposes the king, but if you bring your queen there, there is no g3. It's a pin. And then it makes g5 much stronger. So they played rook d4 to protect such a pawn with the rook. And then g5 was played because it's a pin. How to play. So this time that was a pawn chain and the f4 was the base because the g pawn cannot participate, it's pinned. Let's say, can they protect with maybe queen d2 move? Maybe, okay, bishop d1. No, how black should play if queen d2? Bishop d1, what's the purpose? G takes f4. So queen d2, then what? Queen g4? What's the purpose of queen g4? Just take? No, I don't understand it. No, that... Okay, I do understand it. Oops. Oh, it seems that black is losing here. I know that the king escapes, but I doubt that this is a good position.
Can you please go back?
Yeah, can I just finish it? So h7, well, maybe there is a perpetual check, which I actually doubt. So let's say this, king g2. Then what? Queen b2 pinning. So how can I get rid of this pin? I cannot, but I can take there first and promote a new queen. And then once the king moves, maybe I can connect these pieces. So let's say if the king goes there, there is a check here. After which I can bring it back to e2 or so on. If the king goes there, then I can play queen there and then play queen f2 and defend. So that's why white is likely to realize their extra piece at the very least. Yeah, I can go back. So here, queen g2, queen d... Where?
No. Go back a little more. When g5 was played. Now, no. Queen was at e2. Yeah, here bishop d1. I'm sacrificing a pawn. Yeah. Now queen comes to h5. I want to exchange. Okay. There is a mate. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So just hold on. Yeah.
Black might have time for this. Yes, exactly. So while you are defending against mate, which I actually don't know how, g3 is well. King g1 should be played, and King g1 was played in the game. Let's rewind. So g5 was played. There was also interesting line. For example, if instead of g5 we first did that, let's say they push. What do you think? What should we do in this position? Mm-hmm. Well, bishop e8, well, looks a bit passive. Do you have a better move? Oh, John, we will get back to that line after we finish the analysis of b5 move. Because I forgot that there is queen g4. I thought the king has to move. But the queen was on d4, so she can go back. So the bishop is hanging. It's likely to be a bishop move. b7, a8, or what? What is alternative to these moves? And the alternative is actually bishop e4. So how does it work? The pawn is lost. The bishop is hanging, so there is no way to protect the pawn and the bishop simultaneously, so they have to trade. But this means a pin. Now what? g3? Yeah, fine. Now I cannot capture because the queen is hanging, but I can do a double attack. And the bishop is lost, so black wins at least a pawn. Fine, let's go over the previous scenario. g5, queen d2, queen g4, f takes this, queen g4. Yeah, it seems that black is winning in this position. So the queens can be exchanged and then h7, but it's still favorable for black. Okay, queen g4, then okay, queen g4, then f takes g5 is a mistake, so maybe this is the move. And then f takes g5. Okay, so this move. This intermediate move, because now bishop g2, queen g2, and it's fine. Okay, so king g1. This is what was played in the game. G takes f4. Then, in order to win this pawn, white offers a queen straight. Your turn. Okay, I can give you a hint. If we trade queens, it's likely to be a draw. The f4 pawn is lost, and no, we are very unlikely to do anything. Queen g5, queen. Oh, okay. Queen f4, queen g2. So queen g5. What they can do? They can try h4 first. I'm not sure if it's a good move. Let's see what else we have. Rook f7, rook g7 sounds like a plan. Okay, let's say this move. There is bishop g2. But for bishop here, I prepared h4. And then I can take. Oh, wait. What is going on? I can just take immediately. The queen is pinned.
No, yeah, bishop G2 is wrong move.
So let's say rook f7, continuing the plan. But then what? Queen g3 is sufficient. Because take, then the king goes to f2 and g2 is no longer under attack. I'm not a big fan of doubling pawns, but this time it looks like bringing the pawn to g3 allows white to save the pawn on g2. Okay, so it doesn't seem to work. Rook f7 is too slow. Maybe after queen g3, the queen should move. Yeah, the queen should move, but it's pinned. Fine. That's why queen g5 doesn't look so good. Let's play queen e7 because it wins the tempo. For example, if what? If queen takes f4, it's queen takes b4. And h6 is not hanging because of checkmate. And if there is a check on g3, which is logical, of course, then it only helps black to reinforce their attack. The king on h7 becomes really safe, and then just one temper needed to attack g2. So that's why after queen e7, white decided that they need to spend time to protect. But queen g7, oops, g7. This is a beautiful maneuver. Why? Because, well, it's not because of bishop g2 coming, it's because e5 is hanging. Was there a chance to save this pawn on e5? It seems not, because such a move like queen e2 fails because of f3. And queen e1 fails because of queen takes g2 mate. Okay, so queen g7, rook f4, queen e5, rook goes back to d4. What now? How we should progress. Okay, so for those who joined us recently, we are talking about pawn chains and how to attack the base of a pawn chain and what it may lead to. So there was a pawn chain f4 e5 which was already liquidated in this example. Well, a3 maybe is passive. So rook f7, rook g7. That's right. Rook f7 was played. They played bishop d3. So for rook g7, they prepared this move. That's why black should act rapidly. How? Queen g3 is annoying. In this position, queen g3 is annoying.
Queen d4 check.
No, it's a check already. So we must trade. Yeah, let's trade. Let's do that. No. Let's advance our pawns. Okay, this, and this, and then we take on g2. And if we take on g2, we win there. Bishop, where? Wait, where? So here, bishop g2. That's queen g2 is a check. Or in which position? So,
After the rook's at f7. So let's say, well, bishop takes g2, queen. If the queen takes, it's rook to g7. But king
okay.
takes, I don't know.
Yeah, the king takes there, so it's not such a big issue. So you cannot take on g2, the king takes. Okay, fine. So queen g3 wasn't a big issue. The endgame is likely to be losing. Well, rook g7 doesn't work because of bishop f1, and that's why black plays f4, which covers this and prepares f3. Bishop f1 anyway. What now? f3? But they can take on f3. Oh, then rook takes, actually. So f3, most likely it's going to be g3. And in order to continue the attack, you have to use the h-pawn maybe. Okay, queen e3 to get a passed pawn. Okay, queen e3 seems like a plan. Well, they are not forced to take, not yet. So let's say what? b5? Well, I like this in game, but at the same time, what you need in case of queen e3 is to advance your pawns. That's why you'd better just move the queen away and then advance your pawns. Your king is relatively safe, but with the queens on the board, you have also chances to succeed with the attack on the enemy king, not only with your pawn promotion. So rook d2. Well, it's already time for e5, but black decides to play this move to keep the position of the bishop stable so that the bishop doesn't need to go back and lose the pawn on d7. c5, well, e5 is a good move, but he plays this. He plays this to attack on a3. How to save this pawn? Does such move like rook a2 work or not? What's your opinion? Okay, so rook a2 works, but temporary. We can play queen c3 and threaten with this move. After which we're gonna win the pawn on e3 for sure. So, well, there is a defense. They can continue with queen d2 move. Queen g7. Now let's still play that, and let's well, or maybe let's just advance the pawn to e3. In the game, it was queen h4, so they sacrificed on a3, but capturing on a3 seems to be too risky. If you take it, then what? No, queen f4. No, queen h6. Yeah, they queen e3, rook f2. So, and then the king is in the danger. So that's why they didn't take it, but brought the queen back to trade it. In case of a trade, which did happen, this in game is winning. What is required is just a pawn push to e3. So king f2, e5, g3. Well, why g3 is played? On the one hand, it's a stupid move because after f takes g3, there is a bishop hanging behind. But it seems that he have to play it. He has to play it because if he does bishop e2, it's e4. Now, for example, what? King f1? And how would you continue then? a4? What do you mean a4? It's black to move. Rook g6, yeah, rook g6, yes. Rook g6 works. You can start with this move if you want, and then bring the king. But you can already bring the king. So king f7, king here, king there, and then play e3 or f3. So white is too passive, and the king's position in the center decides the game, especially if the rooks are exchanged. So that's why he plays g3, which in my opinion only accelerated the white's quick loss. F takes g3, they made the king move, but well, there are so many pawns down then. 2 pawns, this is enough, and this is a weakness. So rook a2 is too passive. They played rook d6, king g7. Yeah, I'll answer this question later. So e4, blocking it. Bishop moves rook a3, 3 extra pawns, and then the rooks are exchanged. So it's a completely winning endgame, even if one pawn is lost. So king d3, king g5. Now just pushing the h pawn allows us to win the game. If the bishops are exchanged, the pawn in game is completely winning. So why, in order to advance the pawns, we need our king coming closer? For example, in case of this scenario. It's the end game, and the king participates like an ordinary piece. It can attack the squares around it. And why I prefer to let the king in the center is because the king is close to both sides of the board. It can invade the queen side and capture, for example, a3, b4, c5 pawns, or it can support the pawns on the king side if we decide to promote them. So this is really what you need. Okay, fine. What did happen in this example? Let's do a quick summary. This is a pawn chain. Black, in order to attack it, starts with queen h4 move. So b4, queen h4, attacking f4. The g pawn doesn't participate and cannot help white to support this pawn chain. So they have to defend the foe with something else. And then black undermines with g5, making e5 pawn a weakness too. The other problem is the king's position and the weakness of the g2 pawn and the idea of bringing the rook to attack g2. So that's why they play king g1 to unpin, but it's already too late because the pawn chain is ruined. They all try to trade queens, but there are other weaknesses. b4 and e7. After queen e7, they defend b4, but after this move, they are very likely to lose the e5 pawn, which happened. Now black is a pawn up, and now their pawns can move, and that was the reason which allowed black to win the game. Later, they just kept pressuring on g2, as well as had in mind the idea of advancing the f and the e pawn, and so white pawn chain was liquidated, black pawn could move further, and because of that, the position is winning. Okay, we have one more example to go over.
Can you please go to the starting position and tell me, is there any merit in terms of playing a rook into c6 and playing a exchange down position, but at least able to create some play?
So you want to sacrifice the exchange and
Yes.
build a fortress? I don't think it's possible.
Yes.
There is a file open.
No, but open file. See, what my plan will be like h3, king g2, and playing my bishop actively. This
How?
bishop on c2. No, not g3, not g3.
h3 or what?
Say I want to keep a pressure on e6 pawn also. So can I put my bishop to b3 first?
Yes, you can, but queen c5. I also want to activate the queen.
So
And,
h3.
actually, yeah. Okay, so queen c5, h3. Rook goes there.
Yeah. And now king g2.
King h2 or g3?
King h2. Sorry, king h2.
King h2. So let's say this.
I think here now queen e3.
Rook c4. Okay, I got it. So g5 already deserves attention, but let's start with king f7 first. Well, b5.
Then h4, h4.
h4. Okay, now it works. But okay, even if not this, what can I do? I cannot. Okay, let's just play this move.
Queen g3.
But you lose everything. So I trade and then win this pawn, then advance my pawns. There, it's not a fortress.
No, I just don't want to trade the queen. Want to keep queen on the board. Maybe
How can you do it?
whatever I am suggesting, that is not the proper follow-up. Just go back.
Okay.
What is the computer evaluation in terms of rook into
-3.
-3. Okay. Means that's not working at all.
Yeah, -3 and 1 in this position. So my moves were even not the most accurate ones, but still allowed to win. Okay, so no, because if there was a file closed and there was no possibility to open it, so let's say there was a pawn on d6 also, and there was no option to open the position, and g5 didn't work for some reason, then yes, it would be possible for white to keep a fortress. But when there is at least one file open and you see that this rook can operate through that file, it's
rook is becoming active because of the open file.
Okay, so the last example, before we proceed with it, let me remind you that our workshops are free. However, if you enjoy this content and you would like to support my work and what my assistants do for the workshops, you can always use this donate button, which allows you to donate through PayPal. Let me show you how it works, and let me send you the link. So then you enter the amount that you want to donate. It can be any amount. Then you click this PayPal button. It redirects you to enter your PayPal account. So you enter and then send money automatically to my PayPal account. I would appreciate any help. The other possibility is to send a transfer through Wise. Well, if you purchase my courses, doesn't really matter where, on Chessable, on my own website is preferable, of course. On the Chess World, it would also help me a lot. Okay. Fine, let's go over the last example. So white to move two pawn chains. So this and this. What do you think? Just overally, whose pawn chain is better, white or black? Okay, Eckhunt thinks that the black pawn structure is better. May I know why?
I think white's better.
I also think white is better, but I'm not sure that everyone understands why. Okay, so Dan thinks it's because of the bishops. Which partially is correct. Yes, this bishop isn't good. This bishop is also restricted. This bishop is out of the pawn chain, and this bishop can go there and even attack b6. Okay, so these are bases of the pawn chain, or foundations of the pawn chain, and the plan for both players is to attack them. White has a better pawn chain because e2 can be easily protected with the king. So even if pieces are exchanged, if this bishop is exchanged, it's really easy to protect d3. But this king is too far from b6. So they need to take actions to protect the b6. And it's actually a difficult task. How exactly do they do it? If they can do it, if they want to do it with the bishop, they have to trade on f5 first, or maybe drive this knight away with g6, which is also a difficult task because every time it happens, h6 is hanging. So d3 is not such a weakness as the b6, and that's why the white's pawn structure is stronger. Well, the things could be reversed in case if, let's say, black could somehow take advantage of this diagonal, take advantage of extra space. For example, with bishop on e8 and queen on b7 and no bishop on e4, there would be an attack. And that's why I would say that, yes, extra space and the control over the diagonal helps black, and their pawn structure allows them to attack. Then things would be completely different. But in this exact case, where there is no attack and the bishop is covering here the whole diagonal, white, the center and the space doesn't matter much, but the weaknesses, how to explain it? So whose pawn is weaker, the position of that player is worse. So black pawn on b6 is weaker than the white pawn on d3, and because of that, black experiences issues. Right now there is a queen, but will the queen be there for the whole game? I doubt. The queen should be active, so the position of the queen should be somewhere here or there, not on a7 or b8, from which they can defend b6. Okay, anyway, white starts with queen h5, having in mind the idea of knight h6. Bishop e6 was played, and what's your opinion? Does knight h6 work? No, actually it does work, but it requires calculation. Bishop h6 works. I don't think so. I don't think there is bishop h6, then king escapes. So bishop h6, pawn takes, knight takes, then what? Maybe it still works. Oh, it's actually the same. Okay, so it's the same. So this, and in this position, he can do what? He can take on h6. Then queen h6. It's not checkmate. The king escapes. So let's say knight b3. Bishop h7, king h8. King goes to g2. It is required because otherwise it's queen a1 and knight g2, threatening queen f1. So king g2, queen a1, bishop f5, and this bishop can be captured. Then the b6 pawn falls, and with 4 pawns versus knight, white should be winning. However, when you calculate this line from a distance, it's really hard to realize it, that this position is winning, that they don't actually have anything. Looks like this is a good move, but it fails. Well, you can always bring your queen. So you can play this move, you can play that. I mean, queen b7 or queen here, then go back, then or escape with the king right away. It's hard to evaluate that position from a distance. If bishop g7, then bishop takes, king takes, and queen g5 works. So this, king g7, h4. And, well, yes, white is still a piece down, but these pieces are tied down to the b6. The knight can go there, but this is coming. So that's why knight h6 works. But it was hard to calculate. That's why bishop f4 was played, with the idea to potentially go to c7. What do you think? What's the best move for black in this position?
Does this knight c4 works?
Okay, good point. Knight c4 works. Knight c4, pawn takes, queen checks,
Queen check
king here, and bishop c4,
and bishop
threatening
c4. Yes,
with this.
threatening win. Yes.
With this. So how to play in this position? It doesn't mean black wins the game, but well, if let's say this move, then yes, it's favorable for black. However, if in this position knight h6 is played, then it can easily be a draw with a repetition. So black doesn't win, but at the same time, they force, with such a sacrifice, they force white to do a perpetual check. Black didn't realize it. It was actually Mark Taimanov. He played knight b3. Well, with queen a1 idea, of course. But queen d1 stops it. Now this would lose the game. So trade, bishop c7, and this is lost. Knight b3, but bishop b6 already, and with such a passed pawn, white easily wins the game. That's why queen e2. h4. Knight, they try to improve the knight. Knight goes to a1. h5. Knight goes to c2. So where this knight goes? Not clear. Maybe to b4 to attack d3. Maybe something like that, but it requires many tempi. So bishop e5 was played. Looks like it's not a threat, so neither knight g7 nor queen g4 is a threat. Bishop g7 is a threat. No, I doubt, because bishop g7, queen g4, and then bishop f5 just. So that's why black continued playing their preparation, queen here. And now the b6 pawn is not protected. So that's why bishop c7 was played, in order to capture it. Maybe instead of queen b2, there was a better move to play. For example, queen what? Queen, no. Queen e1? No, it's still a losing move. Yeah, looks like they are stuck with their knight and queen, and there is no way to save the pawn. Okay, bishop c7. Knight a3. And what's your opinion? Let's take on b6? Or you have any better suggestions? No, taking on b6 isn't a mistake.
Can't we trade the f5 knight earlier and put bishop to e7 and then shifting it to d8?
Earlier, for
Yeah.
example, instead of the queen move.
Yeah, takes. Yeah,
But it's
bishop
too
e7.
late.
Because knight is also hanging, not necessarily that knight is being put in onto c2 square. And move my queen also.
Yes, so that's why, what can you do? You can try queen a7 in this position to trade, because maybe with just one extra pawn, such endgame with bishops of opposite color, maybe not winning.
No, but again, back rank will be the issue. So knight, queen takes knight, queen takes bishop, and then queen moves to a2.
Yeah, but then queen b8.
But then queen a6.
Yeah, but what's the problem? Everything is protected. So
But,
if you want to
very
do
soon
it,
black will be in a rook zone.
no, the king can move. So that should be played then. Queen b6, queen c2. At least you have extra pawn.
Yes.
But well, then not everything is so clear. So that's why, for example, I would consider doing this, and instead of capturing this pawn, I would recommend to focus on the kingside attack. And this is exactly what happened in the game. So they didn't take on b6 after knight a3. They played queen g4, threatening with this. The game continued with queen c1, but let's say let's say bishop f5, queen f5, threatening mate. g6 doesn't work. And there is nothing else that can help to stop queen h7. So queen g4, queen c1, king g2. Finally, they play knight b1. It seems that it's protected with the queen on c1, but bishop f4. Here, the game continued with knight d2, so they pinned themselves, but at the same time we're threatening with queen f1. But if, let's say,
be queen g5, should not be queen g5 earlier, but instead of moving knight?
Queen g5 in this position, yes, it can be played, but isn't it completely losing? Because the endgame is definitely losing. The only chance to save the game is to pass the game to the endgame with bishops of opposite color.
Yeah, okay.
So, okay, knight b1, bishop f4, knight d2, and the game ended here. Queen e2, and that's the end. However, let's say they played this move. How would you continue? Okay, Dan suggests
knight h6?
Yeah, knight h6. This is exactly what Dan suggested. So knight h6, yes. King moves
queen h8,
and
knight f7.
Knight f7 and then queen f5.
Then queen f5, yeah.
Yeah, with two ideas.
Yes.
So that's right. This is how the game would end if queen e1 was played. Okay, let's do a quick summary. So what did happen? First, we have this position to analyze, and there are two pawn chains, the whites and the black ones. Which is better? Which is stronger? So the answer is actually the white pawn chain is better. Why? Because the d3 is not such a weakness as the b6. So the base of the pawn chain is a weakness and can be attacked. The pawn on d3 can be easily protected with the king in case if we trade queens, for example. But the b6 is too far from this king. That's why it only can be protected with pieces. Moreover, b6 is an easy target. What we need is just bishop f4 and bishop c7 if there are no queens on the board. And in order to win this game, white combined two ideas, attacking the pawn on b6 and doing a kingside attack. So he started with a queen move to the king side, then brought the bishop to go bishop c7 later in the game. What black was trying to do was very logical. They tried to activate their queen and knight, which were stuck at the edge of the board, but without success. So finally, the pawn was attacked and could be captured at the very next move, but white decided that their attack is stronger and did queen g4, which was actually absolutely right. Now, in case if the game passes to the endgame, bishop wins the pawn on b6 and it's winning. If they continue maneuvering, then there is a deadly attack. You can take on h6 and deliver checkmate quickly. So this is how white won. There was extra space on the king side and a potential for the king side attack.
Hey, Victor, I was wondering if black had a better chance there when his knight was on a3 by playing like knight a4 and then like right here, so like knight a4 and then I'm sorry, knight c4, pawn c4, bishop c4. He probably picks up the other pawn, but he's got some, like passed pawns. They're like connected passed pawns. I was wondering if that might. Oh, he's going to get mated first. Yeah, I see. Okay.
Yeah, it did make sense. And you see, it did work in one of the lines that we analyzed. So here, knight c4 sacrifice was a good move. And then they had, well, queen e1 first and then bishop c4. So they had the compensation. And actually, in such a scenario, white has to do a perpetual check with queen c8 and queen g4. So yes, there was a possibility to sacrifice the knight and draw the game. To save the game, I mean, forcing white to draw. Because because of this queen invasion and because of the king on g2, which was left without any defense. I mean, it's only covered with pawns. There are no pieces supporting it. Okay, fine. So today we were mainly working on the pawn chains and discussing how to attack the base of a pawn chain and what role such a base may play in the game. So that, I think, was the most representative example where the pawn on d3 was strong enough, while the pawn on b6 was a weakness, and because of that, white managed to win the game. In our previous examples, again, so this was King's Indian, and black attacked here, white attacked here. White spent a tempo on bishop a3, and because of that, the black's attack was faster. In the second game, which I also like a lot, that was a pawn chain, 2 pawns here. So b4 was played, and this pawn was attacked, first with a queen, and then it was undermined with g5, with the idea to not only win this pawn, but to put pressure on the pawn on g2 due to a perfect position of this bishop on c6. So not only undermine the pawn base, but think what it allows you to achieve. Fine, so we are done for today, and actually there is no workshop next Sunday. I'll be in a trip, and I'm not sure if I can get in time. So we're gonna skip one Sunday and continue in 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks, it will be the 8th of November. So we are going to continue on the 8th of November. We are going to start at the same time for Americans, which is 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay, thank you for coming and see you in 2 weeks.